How's it going, everyone? Welcome to today's trade recap or market analysis session. Today is April the 28th, and we took one trade today with a surprisingly low risk to reward, but we did end up winning the trade. It was a 0.25 risk to reward ratio, which absolutely sucks, but the trade in itself was not bad, but the market conditions were quite bad and quite choppy during the main times of our trading, as I like to say. But yeah, let's get into it. First, I want to look over the overall structure of the market for the day just so you guys have a quick understanding. So what we saw prior to 8:30 was that we saw just marked our liquidity levels. We had one above, another one above there. We did have a 1 hour down here, which we did mark out. And then we had a zone below and more main liquidity down at these lows as well. What we did not keep in mind though, and what we did make a mistake of in the morning, was that we used a volume profile from very far. Our volume profile looks something like that. So where do we think our high volume nodes were, the important ones? We thought it was all the way up there, so we're estimating more mean reversion towards the upside. This can give us context for the overall market, but since we're trading such low time frame, I think the overall main range on the 1 hour should have been more than sufficient, or even the 4 hour. So on the 4 hour, we see this is the big range, right? Because this is around 8:30. You don't want to mark out such a short range, so you mark out this pretty decent sized range, and you get that our high volume node is actually down there. Now keep that in mind. If you look at the action that happened in the day, we made a large move towards the downside, but look where we went to. We went right back to the mean, and then after we touched the mean, we started reverting back up, heading likely towards upper liquidity and even potentially towards our longer term high volume nodes above. So just keep that in mind as you're going through this as well. On ES, everything does look pretty similar. Same thing with the high volume nodes and the levels. But let's get into the context within the trade as well, and then we'll also do some footprint analysis on it, and we'll make some preferable outcomes from tomorrow as well. So let's get straight to it. So here we hopped in the market late around 9 a.m., right? And after 9 a.m., or around 9:15, I believe, right? After 9:15, we're just staying around this level, which was a fair value gap, right? So although we're not looking directly for the shorts, because shorts would work if we just looked at the plain charts and did it, but since we're looking at order flow, it did make this whole thing more confusing. But if you simply just look at price action, look how choppy it is within that level, right? I don't really like to trade within choppiness, especially during when it's in my peak trading time. So if you look on Bookmap, right, look at how unclear the liquidity is on Bookmap, right? If we go prior to around 9, it's a bit more clear here at this area, but still look at all of this. This is what I would call more of a blurry style Bookmap, and when Bookmap is quite blurry, you likely should stay flat because there's no clear confluence or target in which buyers or sellers can target. Now here as well, it does still look quite blurry. Like we have this still there, we have this barrier right there, we have both of these there, we have this there, but our main one is here, and we have one at 580 as well. So if you keep moving forward, this was around the time which we took our trade, right? And I'll get over why we took this trade, but overall, the reason to be flat today, if you were using order flow, is because we saw lots of choppy action during our main time. And when we have such choppy conditions, it's not as suitable with our strategy as it may be with other strategies. So you have to know what works with your strategy and what doesn't work. But since this case, it doesn't work as well, we're looking for an area where we can capture. and succeed off of. So I'll tell you why we entered longs in this area. So what we saw was that price went all the way down, but look where we went into. We tapped in and we took liquidity from one of our liquidity levels. And that was also an area on Bookmap prior that had gotten swept, and there was clear showing of buying at that area, right? And not necessarily seller absorption, but there was clear showing of buying. And how I can prove that to you is not only by Bookmap, but also on the footprint. If you look at these lows right here, take a look at what is going on. The candles before, we had major seller delta just come push below and below. But right as we entered these lows, look what we're creating down here. We're creating large amounts of buying delta and large amounts of volume here at this level. So although there is large amounts of buying delta, there is still large amounts of selling delta that has to fight against this buying delta. And that's why we have so much volume here at this lows. We had so much volume, but price could not break down lower, and we start reverting back up. So this shows me that that key level could mean something in the future. If we see potential absorption or anything later on, we might be able to capitalize off of it later on. So when we come back onto the charts, we're chopping, and then we come back down to this level quickly. And right when we go down to that relative area, look what happens here on Bookmap. We go quickly into this area, and then what we see is that price is not continuing to go down after a break of this level right here. I may have been cutting out a bit in these last 5 seconds, but I hope you can get through that. At this level, what we are seeing here is that I don't know what is that in the bottom right. So give me 5 seconds. I'm going to check out what that is and I'll be right back. Alright, we're back now. I think the issue has resolved. I think I just had to click on it. Oh, looks like it came back. Maybe you just had to do that. Hopefully it doesn't show up again, but basically what we saw was that down here, we saw a quick flush down to the lows. We entered into a barrier, and look at what happened here at this barrier. There was barely any selling momentum, but price was still continuing downwards. But here at this level, large amounts of buying delta just came up. Okay, don't know what's going on, but please ignore that. But here down at these lows, we're seeing large amounts of buying volume come in, and that is demonstrated here on the footprint as well, because as we come down and flush to these levels, look what we're seeing. At these lows, first of all, we're seeing buying imbalances right there. On top of the buying imbalances, we're seeing large amounts of buying delta, but look how the candle actually closed. The candle could have closed all the way at the bottom if sellers were truly in, but this is essentially a divergence candle. There is not really any absorption that we saw today that we can capitalize off, but this I would consider a type of divergence in which people could have capitalized off of. And because we saw the absorption here on order flow, and we saw that price did take this liquidity level down here, since we're seeing a flush down there with the barrier, we were thinking that potentially we can create higher lows and actually break this fair value gap. Now, we did see the longs coming out pretty nicely, giving us at least a 1-to-1, but we had to take profits upon invalidation, which we did see later on, right here. We came up, and then we touched into this barrier right here. Here at this barrier, we started forming a small support barrier. So I said that if we hold the support barrier and break above, we can stay holding. But if we see signs of breakage of this lower barrier, we have to get out. And what happened? This lower barrier got broken and we exited right there. Now, realistically, there are two things that could have been better with this trade. First thing is that we could have got a better entry right when we saw the absorption and the reaction off of this barrier right here. we could have made an entry that looked more like this. But instead, we made an entry that looked more like this because we're waiting for that move. That's okay, but you should always take time and just execute when you see the things that you want to see. So entry could have been better. And one other thing on top of that is that we likely should have just stayed flat in this situation because bookmap was quite blurry on the day, and typically when bookmap is blurry as such, you can expect to see quite choppy price action, which is exactly what happened. So I'm not necessarily mad about this trade because it did teach us a great lesson, and I am proud of that and grateful for that. And it did come out in the winning side for us. But this trade, this area could have been better if we stayed flat because of blurry bookmap, and potentially we got a better entry. If we got a better entry, the blurry bookmap situation could be like disregarded, but still it's better to wait for more confirmation and more structure. So now I just want to see and backtest the rest of the day using Orderflow. So let's see what happened here at these highs at 9:45. Please ignore what is going on in the bottom right. I think it's just my Addis charts bugging out because I'm using the delayed version of Addis and it's thinking crypto sim is on. But if we look at what happened here at 9:45, we came down, came back up once again. But here at these levels, we're starting to stay around these levels, and although we're seeing large amounts of buy action, we're not able to hold those levels, right? And this is actually, yeah, this would be our first sign of absorption on the day, because if you look on footprint, take a look at what happened here at these highs right here, right? These highs right here. Just take a look at what happened. We came up to those highs where one, we saw a large barrier on bookmap, and two, we're seeing large amounts of buyer delta here at the top near the barrier. But is price continuing to move higher? No. Since we're seeing large amounts of buying delta up at these highs and we're not able to break through, and there's a clear sign of a barrier there, showing us that there's likely heavy passive selling within the market that can actually reverse the market. When we see signs like this within the market, this could be quite a great area to enter and actually take the shorts in the market. So shorts from this level would have been actually really great. Now we keep going down, potentially an exit there, but realistically, there is a chance that you could have held this short all the way down to this level, which could have been great, but you could have definitely caught the second short that we saw. If you go back onto this chart, I'm trying to see if there's any invalidation signals for any of this within the shorts. Just taking a look at it. Potentially something there, but we're still in the barrier. Nope, no invalidation signal there. Nothing there either. Alright, our first invalidation signal right there at 10:15, no, 10:12 is. So at 10:12, that would have been our first invalidation signal. So let's just set that up just to see what we're looking at, right? So say you get a bad or decent entry down at the lows of this candle, right? Where do you place stop? Above that relative barrier area. So above these highs at 20 ticks, we can go for 120 ticks, right? Where do you target when 10:12 hit? So when 10:12 is likely in this candle, right? So just take a look at that trade, right? At the bottom, so likely the highs. That would have positioned you for a nice 1 to 2.55 risk to reward trade. And there likely could have been another setup on footprint down at these lows for you to re-enter and capture more shorts. But this trade right here would have been quite a spectacular trade. If we stayed patient enough and kept looking for it, we likely could have caught this as well because it was during our trading time. So I am keeping this in the back of my head because we should have been able to catch this, but the fact that we did not catch this is Not the best look, but that's okay. You see some and you don't see some, you win some and you lose some. Today we did happen to win one, even though it's a 0.25 risk to reward trade. Now, that's basically all I'm gonna do here for this video. I will do some pre-day analysis for tomorrow here today. So let's just get a move on that and predict what may happen here for tomorrow. We did seem to take out these highs on NQ. Lower liquidity there. We have more liquidity up there. If we, let's just check this out real quick. See now, if you look at our high volume node, it already moved up with the price. So we're essentially already at it. So unless we see something like this, thinking more towards the upside, I'm not gonna lie, simply with the way structure has been moving here today. And if you look on a longer time frame, a larger length high volume node, we have a pretty high volume node up at this liquidity level. That is very significant that we may head towards if you continue breaking through here. I'm expecting to see some type of move towards this liquidity level because that's a very key level. Unless we break down to these levels, I'm not necessarily expecting too much of a move down. I'm definitely expecting more upside potential rather than downside potential, if I'm going to be honest. I think these are the main scenarios to consider unless we sweep this, make our way down to this level. And since that is a low volume node, that could be an area of divergence. So these are the predictable outcomes I originally see looking at NQ, but let's take a look at ES as well. Look on the 4 hour, we do have a magnet is off. We do have that higher. This is much higher up there. We did take out liquidity there as well, and we are seeming to wick from that area. So I am keeping that in mind as always. It is down there, and I think we may have potentially created liquidity down there as well. So we may actually have to see move down before continuation towards the upside, or we can see reaction from here downwards. Actually, let's see. No, yeah, it's still there. Pretty good. I'm gonna remove this one right here. I'll just move it down to this area, and I'll just take one more high volume node of this entire move. Yeah, we do have high volume node up there, but just look, we have a high volume node here as well. Just mark it around the center of that area. So I'm honestly expecting a move potentially here. Let me just do this. I'm likely expecting one of these two moves, which does seem to line up pretty nicely with NQ, right? Because on NQ, we aren't as deviated away from this high volume node, but in ES, we are pretty far away from it. But it does look like this high volume node and that high right there match up to account for the increased volatility on NQ. But let's take a look finally on the VIX as well. Wix momentum still looks like we can continue towards the downside. We entered upon this key level right here, and we are seeing to show some type of reaction. So if we break through this once again, I do expect to see continued downside. But if we continue downside on the Wix's continued upside, which does look like momentum can carry us to, but if we could definitely make a reaction here up again. So looking at the VIX, depending on the react, if we start to bounce from this level again, we might have to go down before we come back up. but we did make a quite big down move today, so I'm expecting more move towards the upper side tomorrow, but we have to see how market opens, like always. Finally, I do want to see the financial news for that day. So if we look on Forex Factory, tomorrow we do have jolts, which is high impact, and that's pretty much it. We'll definitely give a 5-minute interval here. Since we do have some sort of high impact news tomorrow, we can expect a higher move to happen. So potentially jolts can take us to a high volume node, and then we can start making reactions. But I definitely think what we discussed regarding our preferable outcomes can actually happen. So let's be on the lookout tomorrow to see if any of this can happen. And that's essentially all I have here for today. We discussed the trade that we took today. We looked on Footprint, we looked on Bookmap, we looked at another scenario and made another mock trade that would have been quite an amazing trade. And then finally, we set up our preferable outcomes for today. That's essentially all I have here for today. I highly recommend you to join the Discord server. The link is in the description, and there's many free resources in the server and many resources for you to take advantage of, all for completely free. Additionally, if you leave a comment down below, I'll make sure to answer it there as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for the next analysis or trade recap session. I guess I'll see you guys then. Goodbye.